Lovely surprise. I saw some vehicles earlier on looking or gathered together in this particular spot, and I was wondering if maybe they'd found a lion, but this is just as good. A pair of black rhino, one of whom is enjoying a Sunday afternoon snooze. And it looks as though the two of them have spent the day at the spa. In fact, that one has got mud almost over its entire body. You missed a spot, my friend. Just right at the top. So you'll never see a rhino rolling right over onto its back. Hence why the top of the shoulders doesn't have any mud on it, but the rest of it does. Rhinos love a mud wallow, and it has been hot today, even though it is windy. So a really good opportunity for us to have a look at, well, a couple of different features of the black rhinoceros and what makes it different from the white rhinoceros. First of all, the shape of the head, the way that the head is held, because we call them black rhinoceros. Technically, they're hook-lipped rhinoceros, and you can see why with that hook-lipped rather than the wide lip of the white rhinoceros, and they use that to break off branches. It's quite a prehensile lip. Branches, leaves, anything like that will form part of its diet, as opposed to the grass of the other species. Now, I was a bit worried when I first drove up, because often wind can, in particular with rhino, make them rather unsettled. Makes total sense as to why. They're very, very short-sighted. Their eyesight it's terrible, to say the least. They pick up on movement, but only at around about 50-odd yards. And usually their response is to try and investigate it and to try and smell it, rather than to actually try and see, because they just can't. The calves' eyesight is a bit better than the adults, but the adults have a very keen sense of smell and a very keen sense of hearing. Now, at the moment, our smell's been blown away from them. So they know that something's here, and the one on the left is particularly alert. They know that something's here, and they're probably aware that it's vehicles, because they can probably hear the sound of the engines and people talking. But the wind has made their lives more difficult. I love the fact that we can share rhino with you. Electric floss, did I hear that right? Electric floss. Electric floss, a rhino will typically in the wild... Hi, how are you? Good, thanks. It has been a long time. Sorry about this. Floth, electric floth. Sorry. Where are the lions? I don't know, you tell me. No, me neither. Okay. Cheers, man. It's good to see you again. Hi, guys. Apologies. Electric floth. Electric sloth. Is that it? Is it electric sloth? Right. I'm sorry, it's terrible. I just see one of the other guides that I've got to know recently over the past few weeks, and I haven't seen him in a while because I've been on leave and he's obviously been on leave. Right, electric sloth. Got it, finally. I apologize. And a rhino will typically live between 30 and 40 years, up to 40 years in the wild. So they're long-lived animals. And that applies to male and female as well. 30 to 40 odd years. It's a long time. That's how long they should live, at any rate. Another thing about a black rhino, just while it turns its head, and I'm not sure whether we've got a male or a female here. I'm inclined to say it's a female, but it's difficult to judge with size because, of course, a female can live for 40 years. I have seen female rhino that are just as large as their male counterparts. It's more tricky. But as she presents, or it presents its profile, it's another thing about black rhino you'll find, particularly in older animals, is that the secondary horn, so the one that is behind, the shorter one, that'll often grow almost as long as the front horn. At times they even look as though they're going to touch as they grow. Now, for new viewers, this is a very important fact to talk about. A rhino horn is made of keratin. It is the same substance, essentially, Obviously different way that it's structured and laid out, but essentially it is the same substance as your hair and as your fingernails, which is what makes it so tragic that it's used medicinally, because there is absolutely zero medicinal value in a rhino horn. You might as well go and eat a bowl full of your own hair, perhaps clippings from a beard, or chew your own fingernails. Doesn't sound very appetizing, does it? But the sad reality is that there is a belief that it helps with all sorts of things, from hangovers to colds to cancer to other human conditions. Proud Cat Mama only in the beginning. So Proud Cat Mama's wondering, oh, I promised you I'd find a picture of the rhino growth, and I completely forgot. I've got it somewhere. The horn can only be used in determining age when the rhino is still young, and it's used in combination with the size of the rhino next to its mother. And once they reach around about the age of, let's say, 8 or 9, or even up to 10, after that it becomes more tricky to tell whether or not, or to gauge the rhino's age. The best way to do it, of course, is the condition of their teeth. But again, as I always say when I talk about that, you have to get a rhino to open wide, and they generally don't do that. So once they've reached that age, the horn grows continuously. That's one of the reasons that's put forward in terms of dehorning rhino, and why they have to, if you do dehorn them, you have to dehorn them every 5 or so years. But they rub their horns down, that the horn continues to grow. So you can't really utilize it. But I mentioned that the secondary horn, often in older individuals, grows up to the size of the first. That will give you a little bit of an idea, but it's not accurate. And just like human beings, you know how some people's hair grows very, very quickly, some people's fingernails grow quickly, some people's fingernails grow slowly. It'll be the same with rhino. And that horn, used for defense, and for the males, used for battling off other males. I think this is a female and a calf. That one on the one that's lying down to me looks quite small. Probably around the region of 3 years old. If she hasn't had another baby by now, then that would be the right age. And she's got an oxpecker friend. Oh, no, she doesn't anymore. She had an oxpecker. My World, Your Music, none, which is very sad. So My World, Your Music is wondering about white rhino, and if there are any left. There are none in the Mara, which is a pity. And the reason it's such a pity is because this is such a perfect habitat for them. So black rhino tend to favor quite closed habitats. They will come out into the open like this, but really they like to be in dense vegetation, whereas a white rhino loves a thermida field. In other words, they love red grass, and there's plenty of that to go around, and this probably would have an enormous carrying capacity when it comes to white rhino. But unfortunately there aren't any. There's probably somewhere in the region, the numbers, we'll have to get an accurate count, but there's in the region of around about 30 odd black rhino in the Mara. So this massive, massive area, we're so lucky to see them as often as we do. Hopefully, no, not hopefully, definitely, that number's growing. So that number grows all the time. They are protected here, and there's always a ranger around these sightings, making sure that these rhino are safe. And in fact, she's in the best possible place, where she is. Hey girl. I think it's a girl. Another thing to look at, of course, is, speaking of them being monitored and looked after, see those cuts and nicks on her ears? Those are artificial. So she would have been darted, and those would have been cut into her ears by a vet. The reason being, it's the quickest and easiest way of identifying individuals. And when you've got a population as small as this, it's important to be able to monitor each and every single individual, and it's important to be able to recognize them. So what you'll find is that they'll have identity kits where it's basically a drawing of a rhino's face, and each one has got different notches in their ears, which then helps to determine exactly which individual it was. My favorite rhino in the whole wide world was a female called Notches. And the reason she was called Notches was she had 3 right next to each other. In fact, her whole ear, the whole side of her ear, was completely notched by the people who had notched her when she was a calf. She also had a split horn, so she had almost looked like she had 3 horns. Oxbeck is coming back. So while our affectionate female rhino stands guard over her calf, which I'm almost 100% certain is the scenario that we have here, let's go across to a bonding session between the musketeers. There we go. Our little one is up and following along behind Mum. So well, I was correct. It was a female and a calf. It looked like it was a little one at the back. So 2.5-ish. Maybe, yeah. 2.5-ish. A little spray of urine there. I think it might be a boy. It's hard to tell because, of course, they don't spray their urine properly until they reach sexual maturity, in which case their urine sprays backwards. Might also just have been the wind. So there goes Mom and little one. Hello. We're talking about rhino, white rhino in the Mara. Remember that it would have been a different subspecies as well that would have been found in this area, the northern white rhino. And of course, unfortunately, although not extinct yet, the northern white rhino has reached the point of extinction. The last remaining wild male white rhino, his name is Sudan. And he lives in Kenya, not in the Mara though. So unfortunately, if white rhino are reintroduced back into this area, it will have to be southern white rhino, because Sudan has reached the point where he's essentially past breeding age, and finding him a female even from a zoo, while it has been done, has not proved to be successful in the birth of a northern white rhino calf. Look at the typical head-up approach. I'm going to do I'm just going to wait for this vehicle to come past me and then I'll turn around. Wouldn't it be easier to tattoo the rhino's ears instead of cutting them? No. I'll give you one very, very clear reason why that would not be a better idea. First of all, there's two reasons. First of all, tattooing could actually take a fair amount of time, which the longer a rhino is under anesthetic, the more dangerous it becomes. Rhino do die. A lot of animals, there's always a potential risk, just like with human beings in general anesthetic. So that's one of the problems. The second problem is the big one. Remember how we said this rhino is covered in mud? Now, if it were to have a good spa day, that spa day would reach it all the way. It would be covered in mud from the tips of its toes to the tips of its ears. And the tattoo would be covered up completely. And that, of course, would make things very difficult. Whereas notches stand out very clearly. So it's done quickly. They're immediately given antibiotics as soon as that's been done. A long-acting antibiotic. Jumbo. Long-acting antibiotic as well as some antibiotic spray. And they go on their way. Probably, yes, with a slightly sore ear, but it heals quickly, and they often do it to themselves. And then you have to add it to their identity kit. They often rip holes in their ears. 2 retreating bottoms. What a lovely sighting they've given us. Mum and little one. Let's see if I can see what the little one is. Oh, it's dark. I think it's a boy. I think it's a male. Yeah, it's a male. It's a young male calf. So tricky to tell, like with elephants, the testicles of the rhino, the male rhino obviously, are internal. So it's not always obvious or easy. Aren't they spectacular? Ah! The whole car's rocking as the wind blows. I've got my head ducked down almost in the footwell, so that you can hear me over the wind. Okay, as we say goodbye to our rhino and I duck below and shelter, I think that Brent is experiencing something very similar on the other side of the river.